What's good, Livewire fans? All right, this is a pretty good sports update today. Um, in this episode, we're going to cover the Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee little beef that's going on with ESPN. Now, ESPN, we could say they could be called, instead of being called the wide world of sports, they're more like the wide world of drama. It seems like every year, few months, ESPN seem to have something going on with drama with co-workers or any one of their on-air personalities. Now, ever since Pat McAfee has signed on with ESPN, it seems like there has been one event after another. Um, they had a problem with him having Aaron Rodgers on. Come to find out, he was paying Aaron Rodgers over $1 million to be on his show. And you know how controversial Aaron Rodgers could be, but that's what drives ratings. That's what brings entertainment there. Now, we all know Pat McAfee is an ex-football player. A punter, that is. He retired. He got his own podcast. He was on FanDuel. He was making tons of millions of dollars with FanDuel, which I still hate that he left FanDuel because he was getting paid more. He was able to do what he wanted to do. He was able to be himself. ESPN does not like certain personalities to be themselves. They like controversy. They like stirring the pot. They like to not touch on sensitive subjects. They like to cover certain things. You know, they only pick and choose what they want to on air when it comes to certain specific topics of their program. But Pat McAfee is so raw and uncut. He's like an anomaly of what ESPN isn't about. You got the likes of Stephen A. Smith, who talks a good game, but then cowers to certain subjects. He targets certain players, you know, and you got Molly Cram there, who's a mediator. She's annoying. She just don't know anything about sports. She just piggyback off. They had an issue with Ryan Clark. Now they got his contracts, fixed. Ryan Clark got his own podcast called The Pivot, which is very excellent. Shout out to The Pivot. But ESPN has a history of this. If you go back, all the way back to where Jamel Hill, Michael Smith, Say Steele, Carrie Champion, all of these guys, ESPN has evolved to a drama show. You got to think about the likes of Stuart Scott, Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, I'm glad he's out of there because he's already been controversial. A lot of the old heads that have been there, that carried the flagship for so long. And now ESPN has evolved into this media-hungry platform to get clicks and views. And they know how to do it because it's all about crossing the line. It's all about not saying the political right thing. It's always saying to the wrong thing or crossing that line or walking that line just enough to get a rise out of people. That's just what it's about these days. You have to be a little bit controversial to either do it on your content on YouTube or your podcast or on TV. You have to be a little bit controversial. Everything can't not be always politically correct or saying this. Controversy sells, just like sex sells, But ESPN knew what they was getting in Pat McAfee. Now, we all know Stephen A. Smith history with his people ever since Skip Bayless left. Because you got to think, Skip Bayless was the first person, when they started doing first take with cold pizza back in the day. Skip Bayless was probably the most controversial person because he would taper the line. He would ruffle feathers. He would say things to get you agitated, get you mad on air. He done did it with the likes of Jalen Rose, Merrill Hodge, a plethora. He skipped known for calling players names, giving them little nicknames and stuff like that. So when Stephen A. Smith came along, him and Skip kind of like worked together. And you kind of see how when Stephen A. came, he was loud, brash, and he was exciting, entertaining. People loved him. Then you could see the change in Stephen A. Smith through the years working with Skip Bayless. Because if you think about it, Skip Bayless pretty much kind of mold Stephen A. into the no nonsense, in your face, cross the line kind of guy. You know what I'm saying? You just one was white, one was black. That's the difference. But as Skip moved on, then you had Stephen A. taking over. And then you had Stephen A. Smith had a lot of guys on the show. You know, he became the bigger name. He got the bigger pay. Everybody else wanted a piece of the pie because they felt like they was on Stephen A. level, which that wasn't the case. But at the same time, guess what? Stephen A. is still there. So Stephen A. Smith had, him and Jay Williams, basketball savant, got into it a couple of times. You had Stephen A. Smith getting into it. They brought Max Kellerman on. Now, Max Kellerman is a boxer. Now, he could talk politics and social issues outside of sports, but his bread and butter was politics. But you got to think, him and Stephen A. Smith was never a mesh. And I don't think Stephen A. Smith never wanted him. But you see how that played out. He got Max Kellerman gone. Now Max Kellerman is no longer on ESPN. Don't know what he's doing. But hey, that's a story for another day. But now we hear currently of all the things that I have talked about, alluded to, and brought to you forefront is to where we at now. Apparently, Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee had a phone conversation, which the phone conversation pretty much got heated because, Stephen A. Smith, he has a tendency to try to think somebody's beneath him because he's the quote unquote hot guy, the head guy at ESPN. So I guess he figured that, Pat McAfee was going to back down to him and stuff like that. But Stephen A. got to understand, Pat McAfee don't need him. Because when Pat McAfee was on FanDuel TV, you got to think, ESPN was calling him over to be on game day. He was making appearances on game day. You know what I'm saying? So, and apparently for what has happened, I guess it was something due to a new segment, or whatever the case may be, and they probably couldn't agree on it. Now, the New York Post wrote this article stating that the private conversation between the two got heated and things escalated to where Pat McAfee called Stephen A. mother trucker. You already know what that is. So the dispute arose over creative differences involving a yet to be announced project that Stephen A. Smith is executive producing through his own production company, Mr. Stephen A. Smith Productions, that will ultimately air on ESPN. Now, if I anything, taken into this situation is that why would Pat McAfee agree to something like that? You know what I'm saying? Because Stephen A. Smith having his own company, then he's going to call the shots. He's going to want to direct. He's going to want to change things. And he's not going to want to cater to the idea of what Pat McAfee could bring to the new segment. And if Pat McAfee is not agreeing with it, then Stephen A. Smith feel like he could pull rank, you know what I'm saying, and talk to Pat McAfee any kind of way. And there's been a lot of times that Stephen A. Smith have gotten himself in a lot of hot water for how he's tried to malign and discredit or be how he talked to people, And you can see it a little bit now because ever since they got Shannon over there, you can see Shannon, when he was with Skip, they had a long run, 70 years or whatever the case might be. But there was times where him and Skip got heated. And it got about over a year ago, it got really bad where an incident, about DeMar Hamlin took place. And then a situation about Tom Brady took place. And you know how passionate Skip is about Tom Brady and certain sports figures. But at the same time, Shannon, to me, is a little sensitive. Now, nobody doesn't want to be talked any kind of way, but at the same time, Shannon is loud. He wants to raise his voice and everything like that. And when he get high pitched, his voice starts to crack. You know what I'm saying? And you saw it not too long ago with him and JJ Redick got into it. But this is what ESPN does. They love to bring controversy. And people think whether it's real beef or not, it works for ESPN because they still there. They the bigger brand. They're the bigger force in sports right now. So whether we agree with it, whether we don't agree with it, at the end of the day, ESPN doesn't care what we think. Long as they could put guys on that platform to cause stir up and be loud and brash, long as they don't overstep the line to where it could cause their job and they could walk that tightrope, then it's good for business. You know what I'm saying? Now, Pat McAfee had his issues with one of the producers, like I alluded to early in this segment, with the Aaron Rodgers situation. But see, ESPN wants to control Pat McAfee. Stephen A. Smith wants to control Pat McAfee because he feels that Pat McAfee is a threat to him. Because to be honest with you, if Pat McAfee branches off into another show of ESPN, Stephen A. Smith is not going to sit well to that. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to sit well with that. Now, Stephen A. Smith could probably, try to have Pat McAfee show move to a later slot where he could lose viewership because Pat McAfee took over the Max Kellerman's spot. The show that Max had called This Just In. So Pat McAfee took that spot. And anything from that spot on down is worth watching because you got to think. I think The Herd comes on Fox around that time. You got probably Rome, Jim Rome. He's with CBS Sports. So I think he comes on around that time. And then you think you got Fox has who Fox has? I think they have on First Things First that comes on, in which nobody really watches that anyway. So Pat McAfee is drawing ratings from that spot because First Take comes on for 9:30 to about 10, 12, whatever they stay on for. So you got to think about that. If they lose Pat McAfee, ESPN gonna take a really major hit because they paid Pat McAfee a lot of money. Now, if his contract was to end, you know what I'm saying, then we don't know. But then you got to think about this: Stephen A. Smith, could be moving on from ESPN eventually. Like I just said, that he has his own production. He's probably gonna be doing other things. And this is where Shannon Sharpe comes in at. Shannon Sharpe probably is going to be the successor of Stephen A. Smith on First Take. He's going to run that brand. He's going to now. I don't know how well he's going to be able to do it like Stephen A. has, but if you gonna be on there and you're gonna have guys like JJ and all this talking basketball and all this stuff, people might be turned off with it. Now, like I say, the First Take probably will do good, but it probably won't survive after Stephen A. Smith because he carried that show pretty much. Because Stephen A. Smith got his own podcast, Shannon Sharpe got 2 podcasts. So these guys are making money outside of what ESPN is providing for them, but ESPN can't survive without these guys. Because if you remove Stephen A., if you remove Shannon, if you remove Pat McAfee, ESPN is dead in the water. There is nobody on ESPN, man or woman, that could carry that show in those time spots, even on First Take or whatever the case may be. It's just not. You don't have a stronger personality to do that. JJ Redick, nah. I mean, who else you could think of? None. So, what do I make of this little beef between Stephen A. and Pat McAfee? Well, I think per se is that um there's tension. I think it's tension. I think it's jealousy, and most solely on Stephen A. part. Now they both came out, however, the result of differences. And they say they look forward to working with each other, but this is a story that you're gonna have to pay close attention as the weeks, months, and years to come. Because the saying always goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. Now, Stephen A took to his podcast. He said, I have enough. Pat McAfee took to his podcast and said, well, I have nothing but love for Stephen A. Smith. I think I am still welcome on First Take. I was scheduled through the football season to join on Tuesdays. Hopefully next year that will happen as well. Because there were reports that saying that Stephen A banned him from First Take. Now, I'm sure he probably, if he is banned off of First Take, that don't mean nothing because guess what? Pat McAfee could schedule the same people to come on his show in the afternoon and still talk football. Pat McAfee is more knowledgeable to talk football than Stephen A. Smith. Yeah, you can have a panel of people or you can have Shannon on there. But guess what? Who's to say that Pat McAfee can't get the same people or more well-rounded people to come on his show to talk sports? You know what I'm saying? So people are going to tune in to Pat McAfee's show. You could keep Pat McAfee off of First Take, but that still is not going to stop him for what he's doing on his show, on his platform. That's the difference. So I just don't understand if Stephen A's trying to ban him off of First Take. What you think that's going to do to him? Nothing. It's not going to do a thing at all. The man could just get whoever. Now, Stephen A. Smith did come out and say, well, Pat McAfee and I have no issues at the notion, and that he be banned from First Take is BS. Smith say, we are number one, and he has absolutely contributed to us remaining number one through the Super Bowl, and he just did that, kicking ass each time he came on the air. If McAfee wants to be on First Take next season, he will be on First Take. I love winners, and McAfee has proven he wins, which helps me win. I love Pat McAfee. I love him to death. I love his swag. I love the fact that he's an honest brother. He don't give a shit. That's my kind of dude. Now, you could take all of that with Stephen A. Smith and roll it into a pig's blanket, but Stephen A. Smith was going to say the right thing because if you read to what he said, he likes that Pat McAfee is raw and uncut. But Stephen A. Smith also don't like a person that could challenge him either. That's the difference. You could love a person for being one way, but if that same kind of guy that you admire or have admiration for, then guess what? He's going to be the kind of guy that could rival you, that could go toe to toe with you. And there's pretty much nothing you could do about it because you could, like I said, you could take him off a First Take, but you can't stop him for being on game day. You can't stop him for bringing football guys on his show because guess what? If he wanted to, he could easily blow up his viewership even more by bringing so many different guys, like a Nick Saban, like a Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh, all of these guys, have these guys on his show. He could get guys on his show probably faster than First Take can get guys on to sit in on a show. That's the difference. That is the difference that Stephen A. has to realize. And I think that's somewhat where Stephen A. Smith have to realize. So with all of that being said and done, Y'all give me y'all thoughts on what y'all think of the Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee situation. I think it's to me. I think at the end of the day, it's what it is. Uh, I mean, but like I said, this is a story that probably much need to be watched very, very closely to see how it plays out. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, Pat McAfee is bringing something different to ESPN, and they should embrace it more instead of just trying to have all these egos. But ESPN never does anything the right way anyway. That's just how they are. But until then, this is your boy Livewire Sports Media. Stay blessed, stay good. Until the next video, I salute. I'm out.